My name is Sarah Mitchell. I am 31 years old. And 3 weeks ago, at my brother-in-law's wedding reception, a woman I had never met walked up to me in front of 200 guests and told everyone. She said I had faked my pregnancy to trap my husband. She said I had manipulated him into marrying me by pretending to be someone I was not. And before I could say a single word, my mother-in-law stepped forward, looked my husband straight in the eyes, and said, "We tried to warn you." I stood there in my blue dress with my 5-month belly and my shaking hands, and I watched the room turn against me in a matter of seconds. I watched people who had hugged me at Christmas look at me like I was a stranger. I watched my husband's father cross his arms and say nothing. And I waited terrified for my husband to speak. What he did next is the reason I am telling you this story. But before I get there, I need you to understand how we got to that moment. Because nothing about what happened that night came out of nowhere. The truth had been building for 2.5 years, hiding underneath polite smiles and carefully chosen words. And I was too in love, and maybe too naive, to see it clearly until it was standing right in front of me in a white cocktail dress. My husband's name is Daniel. We met at the hospital where I work as a registered nurse in Charlotte, North Carolina. He had come in with his younger brother, who had broken his wrist playing basketball. Daniel sat in the waiting room for 4 hours without complaining once. He read a book. He got coffee from the vending machine for the nurses at the station without being asked. When I finally walked out to update him on his brother, he looked up and smiled and said, "Thank you for taking care of him. I know you all are stretched thin tonight." Nobody ever says that. In 4 years of nursing, almost nobody ever said that. We talked for 20 minutes while his brother got his cast fitted. He asked me about my job, my patients, what made someone want to do the kind of work I did. He listened the way people listen when they're actually curious and not just waiting for their turn to talk. By the time his brother came out with a bright orange cast, I had already agreed to have coffee with Daniel the following Saturday. What I did not know yet, what he told me carefully and gently on our third date, was that his family owned Hartwell Development Group, one of the largest commercial real estate firms in the Southeast. His father had built it from nothing over 30 years. His mother sat on the boards of 2 charitable foundations. His brother was about to go to law school. They lived in a house in Myers Park with a circular driveway and a fountain. They went to Hilton Head every August and Aspen every February. And I grew up in a 2-bedroom rental in Kannapolis with my mother, who cleaned hotel rooms, and my father, who drove a delivery truck until his back gave out when I was 16. We were not poor in the way that makes a good story. We were poor in the quiet, grinding way that means you do your homework under fluorescent lights at the kitchen table because your bedroom does not have a lamp. And you learn very early that certain things in this world are simply not meant for you. Daniel never made me feel that way. Not once. Not in 2.5 years of dating and not in 14 months of marriage. When I was with him, I felt like myself, the fullest, most real version of myself. That was the thing his family could never accept. Not that I was poor, not really. It was that I didn't need him to feel complete, and that somehow made me threatening. His mother, whose name is Carolyn, was gracious to my face from the very beginning. She was the kind of woman who knows exactly how to make you feel welcomed and subtly inferior at the same time. She would compliment my earrings and then mention where she had bought hers. She would ask about my parents with a warm smile that held just enough pity to sting. She called me sweet so many times that I started to hear it as an insult. You could tell her son had good taste. She once told a friend at a dinner party, loudly enough for me to hear, just not always practical taste. Daniel would squeeze my hand under the table when things like that happened. He would pull me aside later and apologize. He would tell me she was from a different generation, that she meant well, that she would come around. I believed him. Or maybe I just wanted to. His father, Robert, barely acknowledged me at all. He asked about my job exactly once, nodded as if I had confirmed something he already suspected, and then turned to talk to someone else. At every family event I attended for 2 years, he looked at me the way people look at furniture, aware of my presence, unbothered by it, not particularly interested in whether I stayed or went. The one person who was genuinely kind to me was Daniel's younger brother, Marcus. He was 27, funny, easy to talk to, And he had a way of making me feel like I belonged simply by including me in conversations and laughing at my jokes and texting me memes about nursing at random hours of the day. When Marcus got engaged to his girlfriend, Priya, I was genuinely happy. Priya was warm and funny, and she had grown up in a family not entirely unlike mine, and for the first time I thought maybe there would be another person at family dinners who actually saw me. Their wedding was set for the first Saturday in October. It was a beautiful ceremony at a vineyard outside of Charlotte, the kind of fall afternoon that looks like something a photographer staged. Golden light, red leaves, wooden chairs set up on a hill with a view of the mountains. I wore a navy dress. My bump was just beginning to show. 5 months along, the pregnancy we had announced 2 months earlier to quiet smiles from Daniel's family and one very small, very controlled hug from Carolyn that lasted approximately 1.5 seconds. Daniel was the best man. He had spent weeks writing his toast. He was nervous and happy and kept fixing his tie in the rearview mirror on the drive over, and I kept telling him he looked perfect, and he kept telling me I was the most beautiful person at any event we had ever attended. And by the time we pulled into the vineyard, I was so full of love for him that I could feel it in my chest, like something warm and lit from the inside. I should have paid more attention to the table seating. The reception was held in a converted barn on the vineyard property. String lights overhead, long wooden tables covered in white linen, flowers everywhere. It was elegant and personal at the same time, which was very Priya. I was seated at the head family table with Daniel, his parents, and a few of Carolyn's closest friends. Across the room, I noticed a woman sitting at a table near the bar. She was tall, very put together, with dark hair and the particular kind of confidence that comes from being told your entire life that you belong in every room you enter. I did not recognize her. I assumed she was one of Priya's cousins or a colleague of Marcus's from his firm. I did not think about her again for another 2 hours. The evening moved beautifully. The food was wonderful, the toasts were funny and heartfelt, and Daniel's speech made half the room cry and the other half laugh, which is exactly what a best man speech is supposed to do. Marcus hugged him for a long time afterward. Priya wiped her eyes. I sat there watching my husband at the microphone and thought, I cannot believe this is my life. I cannot believe I get to love this person. That was the last moment of the night that felt safe. It was during the open dancing portion, about an hour after dinner, that I noticed the dark-haired woman making her way through the crowd. She was not walking toward the dance floor. She was walking toward me. Her eyes were fixed and deliberate, and she was moving with the kind of purpose that does not belong at a wedding reception. I set down my glass. Something in my stomach tightened. She stopped directly in front of me. She looked at my belly first, then at my face. And then she turned slowly, deliberately, and addressed the people closest to us. Her voice was loud enough to carry. "I'm sorry," she said, and she did not sound sorry at all. "I think there's something everyone at this table should know about Daniel's wife." The music was still playing across the room. People nearby turned to look. "Her pregnancy," the woman said, "is not what she's told everyone it is." I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She set it on the table in front of the nearest guests. "I have documentation from a fertility clinic in Charlotte. Sarah has been receiving hormonal treatments for a condition that makes natural conception nearly impossible. She knew this before she married Daniel. She never told him. The pregnancy was achieved through a procedure she hid from her husband and his entire family." The table went quiet. "I'm telling you this," she continued, still in that composed, steady voice, "because Daniel deserves to know the truth about the woman he married. And so does this family." I felt the room tilt. "That is a lie," I said. My voice was shaking. "I don't know who you are, but everything you just said is a lie." She looked at me with something that was almost pity. "My name is Victoria Lange. Daniel and I dated for 3 years before you came along. I think his family knows who I am." I turned toward the table, toward Carolyn. Carolyn's expression did not change. She was looking at me with that same measured, polished calm she always wore, but underneath the composure, there was something else. something that looked, unmistakably, like relief. "We only want what's best for our son," Carolyn said. And then, before I could respond to either of them, Robert spoke for what felt like the first time all evening. "Daniel," he said, looking past me at my husband, who had just come back from the bar and stopped a few feet away, clearly trying to process what he had walked into. "It's time to deal with this." Several of Carolyn's friends leaned in. One of them shook her head slowly. Another reached over and put a hand on Carolyn's arm as if to offer comfort. I heard the words we suspected from someone I didn't recognize, and then she always seemed from someone I had met at Thanksgiving, and I felt the air in the room change the way it changes right before a storm charged and heavy and wrong. "Daniel," I said. My voice broke. "None of what she just said is true, I promise you. I have never been to that clinic. I have never hidden anything from you." He looked at me. He looked at Victoria. He looked at the piece of paper still sitting on the table, and then he looked at his mother. What he saw in her face must have told him something, because his jaw tightened in a way I had only seen once before the night. A contractor tried to cheat an elderly client of his firm, and Daniel spent 4 hours taking him apart legally without raising his voice once. It was not anger, exactly. It was something colder and more deliberate than anger. He picked up the paper. He read it. Then he set it back down. "Where did you get this?" he said to Victoria. His voice was very quiet. She blinked. She had been expecting a different reaction. "I told you. It's from a fertility clinic." "I heard what you said." He looked at her directly. "I'm asking where you got it. Because my wife has never been a patient at any fertility clinic in Charlotte. I know this because I have been to every single one of her prenatal appointments. I have sat in every waiting room. I have spoken to her OB. I was in the room when we saw the heartbeat for the first time." He paused. "So, I am going to ask you one more time. Where did this come from?" Victoria's composure cracked just slightly. "I received it from someone who gave it to you?" Daniel said. The table was completely silent. Victoria glanced just for a fraction of a second, so quickly that you would miss it if you weren't watching toward Carolyn. Daniel saw it. I saw him see it. For a long moment, he did not speak. He stood there with the paper in his hand, and he looked at his mother, and his mother looked back at him with her chin slightly lifted, the way she always looked when she had decided she was right about something and no one was going to change that. "Did you put her up to this?" he said. "Daniel." His father's voice was a warning. "I'm not talking to you right now." His eyes didn't leave his mother. "Did you arrange this? Tonight? At your son's wedding?" Carolyn set down her wine glass very carefully. "Everything I have ever done has been for the good of this family." That is not an answer. It is the only answer that matters. Her voice was steady and precise and completely without remorse. "That girl has never been right for you. Her background, her family, the way she— Don't." The word came out of him like something cut. "Don't you finish that sentence? You have a responsibility to this family. To what we've built. A child with her. Is my child." His voice did not waver. "Our child. Mine and my wife's. And if you have spent one single minute of your time trying to destroy that—" "I spent 30 years building something worth protecting," Carolyn said, and now there was heat in her voice too, controlled but present. "You think I was going to watch you throw it away on someone who—" "Mom." Marcus had appeared at Daniel's side. His voice was low and measured and absolutely serious. "Stop talking." Carolyn turned to her younger son. "You don't understand what is at stake." "I understand exactly what's at stake," Marcus said, "and I understand what you just did. At my wedding." He looked at her for a long moment, and the expression on his face was something I had never seen from him before. Not anger, grief. "At my wedding, Mom." The silence that followed was the kind that fills up a space completely, that leaves no room for anything else. Then Daniel turned to me. "And here is the thing I will carry for the rest of my life. The thing that I go back to on the hard days when doubt creeps in and nothing feels solid." He did not look at me like someone who had been shaken. He did not look at me with questions behind his eyes. He looked at me the way he looked at me on our wedding day, the way he looked at me the morning we found out we were pregnant, with a kind of certainty that requires no explanation because it does not come from logic. It comes from something older and deeper than that. He walked over to me and took both of my hands in his. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I'm sorry you had to sit through that." I was crying. I hadn't realized I had started. "Daniel, we're going to go," he said. He said it gently, but there was nothing uncertain in it. "You are not walking out of here," his father said from behind him. Daniel turned. "You're right," he said. "I'm not walking out, I'm leaving. With my wife. Those are different things." He looked at his father and then at his mother, and his voice was calm in the way that deep water is calm, completely still on the surface and very, very cold underneath. "I need some time before I can have a conversation with either of you about what just happened. But I want you to understand something before I go." He paused. "She is my family. That baby is my family. And nothing, no amount of money, no property, no name, no reputation is worth more to me than they are. You spent 30 years teaching me that family means everything. You just didn't mean the family I actually chose." He squeezed my hand. I held on. "Come on," he said softly. "Let's go home." We said goodbye to Marcus and Priya quietly near the door. Marcus held onto his brother for a long time without speaking. Priya hugged me and whispered that she was so sorry, that she had no idea, that she loved us both. I thanked her for a beautiful wedding and meant it, even then, even in the middle of all of it. We drove home mostly in silence. Not the uncomfortable kind. The kind that exists between two people who don't need to fill every space with words, who can just be next to each other while they process something large and strange and painful. Halfway home, Daniel reached over and put his hand over mine where it rested on my knee. He didn't say anything, he just kept it there. When we got inside, I sat down on the couch and finally let myself fall apart completely, not quietly. The ugly kind, the kind where you can't breathe right and your whole face hurts afterward. Daniel sat next to me and held me and didn't try to stop it or speed it up. He just stayed. When I finally got some of it out, I looked at him and said, "Did you have any idea? Any of it?" He was quiet for a moment. I knew she had reservations about us. I told myself it was just about our different backgrounds, that she would get past it. I didn't think he stopped. I didn't let myself think she would go this far. "The woman," I said. "Victoria. We dated in our mid-20s. It ended because I wasn't in love with her. She was always close with my mother." He looked at the wall across from us. "I should have seen it. You couldn't have known. I should have protected you better than this." He said it simply, without drama. Like a fact. That night, I fell asleep with his arm around me, and for the first time since we had pulled out of the vineyard parking lot, I felt something other than afraid. I felt certain. Certain of him. Certain of us. Certain that whatever came next, we were going to face it together. What came next was harder than I expected. The days that followed were quiet in a heavy way. Daniel spoke briefly to Marcus, who confirmed that Carolyn had quietly invited Victoria as a +1 of one of her friends without telling anyone, including Marcus and Priya, who she was or why she was coming. Marcus was devastated. He and Priya had apologized to us 3 times. He told Daniel he understood if Daniel needed space from the whole family. Daniel's parents called twice. He let it go to voicemail both times. He did not return the calls. He spent a lot of time in his home office in the evenings, and I did not ask what he was doing, because I had learned that he processes things by working through them systematically, and I trusted him to come back to me when he was ready. On the 5th day, he came to find me in the kitchen and sat down across from me at the table. "I want to tell you what I'm planning to do," he said. I set down my coffee. "I'm not going to let this just go away quietly," he said. "They need to understand that what happened was not something that can be smoothed over with a phone call and an apology. My mother orchestrated a deliberate, premeditated attempt to humiliate you in front of our entire family and destroy your reputation. She used a fake medical document." He paused. "I had an attorney look at it. It's not a real document. It doesn't correspond to any actual clinic in Charlotte. She had it made. I stared at him. She had it made, he repeated. She found a woman she had been cultivating a connection with for years, a woman she knew still had feelings for me or at least harbored enough resentment to cooperate, and she orchestrated the entire thing. He was calm, but his hands on the table were not. And she chose to do it at Marcus and Priya's wedding. She chose to ruin their night along with ours because she thought the setting would give her accusations more weight. More witnesses. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. I need you to know, he said, that I am not cutting my parents off as an emotional reaction. I am doing it as a considered decision. I have thought about this for 5 days. I have thought about whether there is a version of this that ends in reconciliation. He looked at me. I don't see one. Not right now, maybe not ever. Because this was not a moment of bad judgment. This was planned. This was intentional, and it was aimed at you and at our child. I nodded slowly. Is that okay with you? He asked. I looked at him. You don't need my permission to make decisions about your family. I'm not asking for permission, he said. I'm asking if you're okay with all of it. Because this affects you as much as it affects me. I thought about it honestly. I'm sad for you, I said. I know how much you love your parents, even now. I know this is costing you something real. I reached across the table and covered his hands with mine. But I am not going to ask you to make peace with people who tried to take away your trust in me. That's not something I can do. He nodded. He turned his hands over and held mine. Okay, he said. 2 weeks after the wedding, Daniel arranged to meet with his parents at their home in Myers Park. He asked me not to come, not because he wanted to protect me from it, but because he said this was something he needed to do on his own, with full clarity, without the complications that would come from me being in the room. I understood. He was gone for 2 hours. When he came home, he sat down on the front steps and I sat next to him in the late October cold, and he told me what had happened. He had laid out everything: the fake document, the confirmation from the attorney, the timeline of how Victoria had been brought in and what she had been told to say and when. He said his mother cried. He said his father tried to reframe it as an act of love, as parents doing what parents do to protect their child. He said they offered to apologize to me directly, to arrange a family dinner, to put things back the way they had been. And I told them, he said, that there is no putting things back. That you do not destroy someone's reputation at a family event with fabricated documents and then offer a dinner as repair. He looked out at the street. My mother told me that in 10 years I would understand why she did it. That I would thank her. He was quiet for a moment. I told her that the only thing I understood with complete certainty was that I had a wife I loved and a child who was going to come into the world in 4 months, and that I would spend every day of my life making sure they both knew they were safe with me. He paused, and then I left. I pressed my forehead against his shoulder. We sat there on the steps for a long time in the cold. That was 3 weeks ago. We are still early in whatever this new chapter is, still learning what it looks like to build a life without the structure of his family around us, still figuring out what holidays mean now and who to call when something happens and how to handle the absence of people who were supposed to be permanent fixtures. It is not easy. Anyone who tells you that doing the right thing is always easy has not had to do the right thing when it costs something real. But I want to tell you what else happened. Because this story does not end on that cold front porch with 2 people figuring out how to carry grief. Last week, my mother-in-law sent a letter. Not a phone call, not a text, a handwritten letter, which surprised me more than anything else about it. I read it twice. It did not contain the word sorry. It contained a great deal about family legacy and what she had sacrificed, and why she had believed she was doing right by her son. But at the very end, in handwriting that looked less controlled than the rest, she wrote, I am aware that I will likely not know my grandchild the way I hope to. That is a consequence I will have to live with. I showed Daniel. He read it. He folded it up and put it in the kitchen drawer where we keep things we are not ready to throw away but are not ready to deal with yet. Not today, he said. Not today, I agreed. Maybe one day, that drawer will open. Maybe there will be a conversation that means something, an acknowledgement that lands honestly, a chance to let our child know their grandparents without carrying the weight of what was done to us. I don't know. I am not closing that door with a deadbolt. But I am not opening it for anyone who has not yet found the courage to use the word I need to hear. My baby is due in February. We are having a girl. We are naming her June, after my grandmother, who cleaned other people's houses her whole life, and somehow still managed to make our small rental feel like the warmest place I have ever been. I think about her a lot lately. I think about what I want June to know about who she comes from, about all of it, the hard parts and the beautiful parts, the things we are proud of and the things we are still working through. I want her to know that her father chose her before she was even born. That when the world gave him an easy way out, he looked at it and turned away. That love, real love, is not what you feel when everything is fine. It is what you do when everything is not. I want her to know that her mother was not perfect. I did not always stand up for myself as clearly as I should have. I let certain things slide because I was afraid of what it would cost to name them. I am still learning. But I want her to know that when it mattered, when it truly, finally mattered, the person I had chosen to build my life with stood in the middle of a room full of people and said, "She is my family." And he meant it. That is the kind of love worth knowing. That is the kind of love worth telling. If any part of this story felt familiar to you, if you have ever stood in a room and felt invisible, or loved someone whose family could not see your worth, or held your breath waiting for the person you trusted most to make a choice, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what you felt. Tell me your story. Because yours matters too.